right, now we're going to look at structures deep to the cerebrum. We did the cerebral cortex areas, which is going to be your primary motor cortex, Wernicke's, Broca's, frontal eye field. But when you say cerebral cortex, this is the outer portion. So we're going to talk about structures that are deep in the cerebral hemispheres, not just this outer section. And these are going to be called your basal nuclei. Remember that in the CNS, when you use the word nuclei, these are going to be groups or clusters of interneuron cell bodies. Again, these are basal nuclei, and the definition of nuclei in the CNS is going to be groups or clusters of interneuron cell bodies. Now, these are very deep in the cerebrum. Now, we're also going to be talking about the limbic system. The limbic system is very deep in the cerebrum, and we will talk about the limbic system and their names and their functions and everything. So we have a couple of pictures that I'm going to use for this. The first one we've already used was the frontal section of the brain. So we have our cerebral cortex area. So the outer portion of your cerebral cortex is going to be the cerebral cortex areas, the outer portion. But now we're looking deep to the cerebrum, very, very deep. So the first thing is we have these nuclei that are going to be located on the outside right here. There's 3 on this side, and then there's 3 on this side. Deep within the cerebral hemispheres on either side, you're going to have your basal ganglia or nuclei. They used to be called ganglia, but they changed the words to nuclei because that is the word associated with the CNS. There are 3 on either side. Again, these are deep in the cerebrum. Now, the other thing is the limbic system. Now, the limbic system is going to be broken down into 2 really important major names called the hippocampus and the amygdala. So those are 2 different names. These are deep in the nervous system. So you're going to have your amygdala, which is going to be right here. And associated with your amygdala and your limbic system is going to be your hippocampus, which is right above it on either side. But these are just deep. You don't have to know this picture, but these represent the limbic system. Another structure that is going to be deep in the cerebrum. All right, so this would be a frontal view if you were looking at it. You can kind of see the gray right here on either side, but these are the basal nuclei. Now I'm going to show you a lateral view as well from your textbook that we're going to take notes on. So we're going to start with the basal nuclei. So I'm going to color code these. The basal nuclei has 3 different names. I'm not going to make you know exactly what they are. I do want you to know their names. Now this big one, it's called globus pallidus. I'm guessing because it was very large. The word caudate means tail, so your caudate nucleus. And then you have one called putamen, and they are on both sides. This may be kind of hard to see, but I'm just coloring them in the same color that I drew on that cross section. These are deep in the cerebrum. Okay, before they changed the word to, well, previously they were known as basal ganglia. So some people still call them basal ganglia, but really the appropriate word to call them is basal nuclei, because we learned that the word ganglia is a group of unipolars. We use the word ganglia in the PNS as a group of neuron cell bodies. And since we're in the brain, we use the word nuclei. This is in the last couple of years that they've actually done this. A nuclei is a group of neuron cell bodies in the CNS. We are definitely in the brain, so we're going to mostly call them basal nuclei. Now, the reason I tell you basal ganglia is because basically, if you're a doctor and you were in like my generation, you were taught it as basal ganglia. It's pretty new. All right, there's 3 of them. These are their names. You have the caudate nucleus. Caudate, caudal means tail. So you can see it looks like a tail. Putamen and globus pallidus. Just know their names. Again, these are deep within the cerebrum. Since they are in the cerebrum, they are called nuclei. Now, functions. You really want to have a good basal nuclei. The first thing that they do is they're going to produce neurotransmitters. The most important one being dopamine. Dopamine is the most important neurotransmitter because it gives you a sense of well-being. It makes you feel like you're healthy. That's their first function. Now, the second function is it's going to help you initiate movements. So to start moving. So someone whose basal ganglia has disintegrated, sometimes they have a hard time starting to move. Initiate means the start of movement. But these are also going to suppress unwanted movements. So like if you have a tic where your like head, kind of moves and you don't want it to move. The basal nuclei prevent unwanted movements. Older people, when they write their name, their hands shake because your basal nuclei disintegrate over time. So like when you're signing your name, like they have a little shake. That's because their basal nuclei have over time, kind of disintegrated. Now, if you have a disease, not just because you're old, but you get a disease where your basal nuclei disintegrate, we call this Parkinson's disease. Your basal nuclei are going to basically disintegrate, but rapidly, severely, not over time like you would see with just normal aging. So you would have a very, very hard time moving your hands. If you've ever seen anyone who has Parkinson's, they walk very, very slowly. They don't feel very good because they're not producing any dopamine. So these are your basal ganglia. So if we looked at the cross or the frontal section, there's 3 of them. They're called globus pallidus. You've got your caudate nucleus and your putamen. There's 3 of them. They're deep in the cerebrum. This is where they're located. This is their functions, and this is the disease of them. So now we're going to talk about the limbic system. So we're going to talk about the limbic system, which is also deep in the cerebrum. And there's going to be 2 parts of the limbic system. But we also know that the limbic system is where our primary olfactory cortex is going to be. All right, this is a pretty large picture. This is going to represent your limbic system. Also, deep within the cerebral cortex. All right, when we talk about your limbic system is really important for memory and emotion. Memory, emotions, and behavior. Now, your limbic system is what kicks on when you're in a fight or flight mode. So like when somebody says, like, did you cheat? When you get mad, this is what kicks on for your emotions. Like, if you're somebody who, like, what I would say is like a crybaby, you cry about everything. I tell you something, you just start crying. You have a very strong limbic system because this is your emotional brain. Now, it includes basically your amygdala. That's what's going to be used for your emotion, which is this structure right here. The amygdala starts here and then it wraps around, and I'm doing it in pink. So that you can see it. Again, remember that the limbic system is deep in the cerebrum. On the opposite side, you can also see the amygdala. Now you will need to know the amygdala and the other structure involved, which is going to be the hippocampus. All right, when we talk about your hippocampus, hippocampus is involved with memory. This this one is going to convert your short-term memory to long-term memory. So when we talk about the limbic system, memory is going to be the hippocampus. Now, emotion. Emotions are going to be with the amygdala. The amygdala assigns emotional values to memory. So if you have had something happen to you like with ketchup, and you're like, oh, I hate ketchup, it just pisses me off, for whatever reason, you can assign emotional value to any memories involving anything. So memories can be good, and memories can make you have emotions. So just thinking about something can make you think about, or you can think about anything associated, a memory that you have, and it can make you have a happy response or a sad response. Now, the other thing that we talked about the limbic system is the site of your primary olfactory cortex. Your primary olfactory cortex is involved with smell. Now, smells are the only special sense that is associated with emotion. So you can actually smell cologne. Like for me, I think of Old Spice, and it makes me think of my dad. Now, if my dad passed away and I smell Old Spice, it might make me cry. So smell also helps you with memory. So there's a lot that they say about memory and smell. As far as your primary olfactory cortex, they say if you take essential oils like peppermint and you are using essential oils, it can help you trigger a memory and you can do better in classes. So there's 3 things that we talk about with the limbic system. Your primary olfactory cortex is the first thing. Your primary olfactory cortex, smell is associated with memory because it's in the limbic system, so it can help with memory. And it helps with emotions. You can actually smell something and get sad. So the second thing is your hippocampus. Your hippocampus is going to be involved with memory. It helps you convert short-term memory to long-term memory. And your amygdala is going to be involving assigning emotional values to memories. So that is the limbic system. On the limbic system, we would also need to say on here, these are deep in the cerebrum. So when we talk about the cerebrum, going way back, because we're still on the cerebrum. When we talked about the cerebrum, we first talked about the outer portion of the cerebrum. How the central sulcuses divide the lobes. There's 5 lobes. We also did the cortex areas. When we say cerebral cortex, we are talking about the outer layer. So we went through the cerebral cortex, the outer portion. It's just this very small, tiny section. We also talked about the fissures in the right and left hemispheres, the corpus callosum and how it connects the two. We also looked at the internal view of this cerebral cortex, so we could see the corpus callosum and the transverse fissure. And then we went into the cerebral cortexes, which is, again, the outer portion in all of these areas. And then the last thing that we've done is we're doing deep to the cerebrum. So we went back to this picture to talk about the basal nuclei and the limbic system. So on the basal nuclei, deep in the cerebrum, we have this picture to basically cover the basal nuclei, and then the limbic system. So we've covered all of the cerebrum. So now we need to move to the cerebellum, the second largest portion, the diencephalon and their functions, and the brainstem and their functions. So I would be taking notes on these pictures. This again will help you with all the structures that you need to know for lab.